For a record 6 years now, Squarespace has been helping me turn my dream into reality, and that's what Squarespace does for millions of other people too. Their industry-leading website creation tools help millions of people start new careers, build new businesses, or just get things done. They're offering a special discount to viewers of this channel, so stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Gamers, let's start with the biggest news of the week, and no, I'm not talking about the marathon delay, and no, I'm not talking about Xbox and PlayStation beginning the hype cycle for the next generation of consoles. Jesus Christ. I am talking about the news that you have all been waiting for and that you have been endlessly commenting on over and over on every fucking video I upload. The Claire Obscure X-Mission 33 video. It is done. It is fully edited, and barring any copyright issues on YouTube, it will go up this weekend, meaning that we can finally start talking about something else in the comment section for the first time in, like, I don't know, 2 months. That would be a nice change. So, while ShellUp finally ships his most delayed video ever, one studio has decided to slap an indefinite delay on their marquee make-or-break release. We all knew it was going to happen, and now it's happened, so let's talk about it. I'm sure I don't need to recount all the beats in the unfolding saga of Marathon to you, dear reader. You already know that it had a big reveal last year and looked really damn cool. You know that select creators and media went hands-on with it earlier this year and offered qualified optimism. You know that the closed alpha test provided a less rosy outlook and some alarming player drop-off. You know that Arc Raiders went into closed testing at around the same time and racked up universal acclaim with some very healthy player counts and engagement numbers to boot. And you know that just when things were starting to look really tough for Marathon, the plagiarism scandal hit. That was the one where Fern Hook, aka Anti-Real, revealed that Bungie had used her art without crediting her and without compensating her. This led to one of the most awkward live streams in the history of video games, and also led Bungie to delay the reveal of new gameplay so that an audit could be conducted, just in case that new gameplay contained more plagiarism. Since that time, Bungie has gone radio silent, but a few things happened in the intervening period. It was reported by at least 2 outlets that Bungie scrapped some mid-year marketing plans, hinting that the project might be delayed. A fairly underreported bit of news is that Marathon got a new creative director in May of this year. Julia Narden was previously the game's narrative director, but in May she stepped up to a broader role. Bungie hasn't provided an official statement on Narden's elevation, but I really don't envy her in this moment. Because as even Sony are willing to admit this past week, the feedback that Marathon has been getting isn't exactly going to make the shareholders go out and double their stock purchases. As part of a recent Sony business meeting, Herman Hulst, the head of PlayStation Studios, did speak about Marathon. Before that, he waded into that dangerously choppy water. Concord, quote, "Live service, we really see that as a great opportunity for us, but with this great opportunity are some unique challenges associated. We talked about some early success, as with Helldivers 2. We also faced some challenges, as with the release of Concord," end quote. Damn, man, talk about understatement of the year. He continued, quote, "I think some really good work actually went into that title, some really big effort, but ultimately that title entered into a hyper-competitive segment of the market, and I think it was insufficiently differentiated to be able to resonate with players," end quote. I do think there was a lot more to that story than that, Herman, but let's not get bogged down. Moving right along, quote, "And so we have reviewed our process in light of this to deeply understand how and why that title failed to meet expectations and to ensure we weren't going to make the same mistakes again. As I said earlier, we've introduced much more rigorous processes for validating, for revalidating our creative, our commercial, our development assumptions and hypotheses, and we now do that on a much more ongoing basis. That's the plan that will ensure we are investing in the right opportunities at the right time, all while maintaining much more predictable timelines," end quote. This is actually the most that Hulst and Sony have spoken about their response to the failure of Concord since its monumental near overnight collapse last year. They had made vague references to changing up their process when it comes to assessing projects, but this is a much more detailed overview of how that process is evolving. It also lines up with anecdotal reporting from a few sources that suggest that live service projects at Sony are under way more scrutiny these days, including Fair Games, which recently lost its director and studio boss Jade Raymond in a leadership reshuffle. Anyway, what did Hulst have to say about Marathon? Quote, "For Marathon, it's our goal to release a very bold, very innovative, and deeply engaging title. It's going to be the first new Bungie title in a decade, so we're really excited for that release. We're monitoring, we're going through the test cycles, we're monitoring the closed alpha cycle the team has just gone through. We're taking all the lessons learned, we're using the capabilities we've built in analytics and user testing to understand how audiences are engaging with the title. Some of that feedback, frankly, has been varied, but it's very useful. This is why we do testing, the constant revalidation of assumptions that we've just talked about. To me, it's so valuable to iterate and to constantly improve the title, so when launch comes, we're going to give the title the optimal chance of success," end quote. And look, he is right in that sense. It has genuinely been varied. Despite the present vibes, there has been some positive sentiment towards Marathon, including from myself, because honestly, I did like a number of elements of it. But yeah, it was immediately clear to me that something was missing here, and until that is slotted in, Marathon is not going to be ready to ship. And that brings us to the delay announcement, which we all knew was coming, but honestly, this is a much bigger delay than we were expecting, and the reasons for it are far more wide-reaching than any of us could have predicted. From a Bungie announcement blog, quote, "Through every comment and real-time conversation on social media and Discord, your voice has been strong and clear. We've taken this to heart and we know we need more time to craft Marathon into the game that truly reflects your passion. After much discussion with our dev team, we've made the decision to delay the September 23rd release," end quote. Notable that Bungie did not commit to a new release date here, but did say that we would hear from them again in Q3 of this year when they provide an update on their development progress and announce a new release date then. For now though, Marathon is delayed indefinitely. But here's where it gets really interesting. Here's what Bungie says they'll be focusing on as they look to put their heads down over the coming months. Quote, "Upping the survival game, more challenging and engaging AI encounters, more rewarding runs with new types of loot and dynamic events, making combat more tense and strategic, doubling down on the Marathon universe, including increased visual fidelity, more narrative and environmental storytelling to discover and interact with, a darker tone that delivers on the themes of the original trilogy, adding more social experiences, including a better player experience for solos and duos, and prox chat so that social stories can come to life," end quote. That is a pretty massive list, and it's not the sort of thing that can be delivered with an extra 3 months of dev time. It's a really profound elements to core gameplay elements, plus adding entirely new things like social systems. And I hate to be the guy to say it, but it took Bungie like 10 years to add a looking for group tool to Destiny, and when it finally did arrive, it didn't really work. So hearing the Bungie are looking to add more social stuff does make me a little nervous about this game's potential release date. But jokes aside, I definitely would not be expecting this to launch this year, and if I were a betting man, I think optimistically we'd be looking at like Q1 next year so Sony can book it in their financial year, but failing that, maybe Q2? It's definitely not soon though, as the scale of changes that Bungie are proposing here indicate that Sony has given them some runway to really respond to player feedback. And honestly, that is a good thing, because we all gave Sony plenty of feedback before Concord launched, and they didn't listen to that, and we all know how that ended. Circling back to that Sony business update now, and PlayStation boss Hideaki Nishino had quite a few interesting things to say about not only this generation of Sony hardware, but the next one as well. First of all, he revealed that the PS5 generation has been Sony's most profitable ever, generating $136 billion in sales over 5 years at a 9.5% profit margin. That last part is important since earlier in the generation, Sony's margins were being squeezed by rapidly growing development costs, as well as supply chain challenges imposed by COVID. With hardware sales improving and COGS steadying, Sony has regained some ground here. Speaking about Sony's pivot to multi-platform publishing, it seems as though Sony are fairly happy with their current approach, where Sony games never make their way to Xbox, except for MLB The Show, I think, but they do end up on PC, and even on the Switch when it makes sense. Quote, "There are multiple participants who together drive the overall game industry, and while there are new engagement models being explored, we ultimately think this is a good thing. However, as I mentioned earlier, we are confident and committed on our current strategy, and there isn't an urgent need for us to pivot. We will continue to monitor play patterns and invest appropriately as required," end quote. So don't expect God of War on Xbox anytime soon. Except, I guess, on the ROG Xbox Ally, which is technically a PC, which can play the God of War PC port. So yeah, you can see how quickly the modern console landscape and publishing model is evolving. Speaking of the launch of the Switch 2, which was the most successful console launch in history, shipping 3.5 million units in its first 4 days, Nishino was congratulatory, but felt like the PS5 was offering something different. Quote, "Catalysts in the market are great for the industry as a whole, as they invigorate the excitement and demand more broadly. PlayStation 5 is designed for an immersive gaming experience, and this includes the innovative DualSense controller features as well. We believe PS5 level performance is required to achieve a great experience on big screens, and in this way we have provided a unique offering for players and creators in this current console generation," end quote. I don't know, man. Tears of the Kingdom Switch 2 edition looks pretty damn good on my big screen, but I also get where he's coming from. On cloud gaming, the one area where Xbox has a definitive edge, Nishino indicated that Sony weren't all that fussed about it. Quote, "Cloud gaming is increasingly providing an additional option for players to access content, but our belief is that the majority of players continue to want to play and experience gaming through local execution without dependency on network conditions. PS5 and PS5 Pro have validated this thesis, I think," end quote. Finally, Nishino did talk about the one thing that we really don't want to be hearing about right now, the PS6. I say that because this has inarguably been the worst console generation ever in terms of the number of exclusive system-selling AAA releases. It really does feel like this generation has only just begun and already Sony are trying to wrap it up. What is this, a speech at the Game Awards? Speaking about the prospect of a PS6, here's what Nishino had to say, quote, "Our core business has evolved into a multifaceted platform, and we now have a large ecosystem of highly engaged players across both the PS5 and PS4 generations, so naturally, there's a huge interest in our next generation console strategy. While we can't share further details at this stage, the future of the platform is top of mind. We are committed to exploring new and enhanced ways for players to engage with our content and services, end quote. Top of mind is not exactly what I want to be hearing right now. It really does feel like this current console generation has a huge amount of life left in it, and I'd much rather hear Sony talk about how they can wring more life out of the current gen hardware rather than, suit up for the next. But believe it or not, they are not the only platform holder talking about their next gen intentions this week. Take it away, Sarah.
At Xbox, our vision is for you to play the games you want with the people you want, anywhere you want. That's why we're investing in our next generation hardware lineup across console, handheld, PC, cloud, and accessories.
That's right, it's official. The next-gen hype cycle has begun with the announcement that Xbox are partnering with AMD on next-gen silicon that will power a family of devices, including a handheld, if Sarah's cryptic words are anything to go by. Now, to be clear, this does not necessarily mean that Xbox are working on a dedicated handheld device, and there have been multiple reports that suggest that Xbox were working on something like that, but have since scrapped those plans. Instead, it's highly likely that this next generation of silicon and its accompanying architecture will be utilized by other hardware manufacturers to make handheld gaming PCs. Very similar, of course, to the ROG Xbox Ally. But who's to say how far-reaching the application of this new silicon will be? I mean, zooming out for a bit, Bond specifically said that next generation, you won't be tied to a single store. That language is very aligned to the sort of stuff I talked about in my ROG Xbox Ally preview video, where that device is basically just a PC that lets you access any storefront, including Steam and Epic Games and whatever else. It's highly likely that the next generation Xbox that sits under your TV will do the same thing. I mean, here's what she also said, quote, to ensure that Windows is the #1 platform for gaming, end quote. She didn't say Xbox was the #1 platform for gaming, she said Windows. And Windows runs Steam and Epic Games and all the other ones too. The point I'm making is this: the next Xbox console will almost certainly be a PC that sits under your TV with an intuitive console-like user experience, and I think the carefully selected wording in this reveal video all but confirms that. With that approach comes a really admirable byproduct, backwards compatibility, because that's generally how PCs work, sort of. Xbox's commitment to this has been notable and great, given how often console generations have left behind previous gen libraries. Bond restated Xbox's commitment to this, saying that the next generation of Xbox will play all of your existing library of Xbox games, and honestly, you'd love to see it. Hey, speaking of next gen, one studio that would love to be able to ship on next gen hardware is CD Projekt Red, because Lord knows they sure as shit don't want to have to squeeze their next game into an Xbox Series S. Recently, members of CD Projekt Red sat down with Digital Foundry to discuss the recent Witcher 4 Unreal Engine tech demo, which, and I cannot stress this enough yet again, was not gameplay. It was a tech demo, a very impressive one at that, but not gameplay. Speaking to Digital Foundry, it was clear that CD Projekt Red had learned a lot from the bruising launch of Cyberpunk 2077. Quote, we always do PC and we push and then we try to scale down, but then we had so many problems in the past. This time around, we really want to be more console-first development, and then we saw the challenge to realize the ambition to make what we want at 60 FPS on PS5, there would be work, end quote. So that's kind of a big deal, to be honest. This is CD Projekt Red telling us that they're adopting a console-first development model and that they're shooting for a visual and performance target that can fit inside a PS5 console and, by extension, an Xbox Series X console. So that's awesome, but it's also not to say that CD Projekt Red have entirely given up on being ambitious with a PC port. Quote, because we're CD Projekt Red, we always like to push PC to the limit. It's just a creative process of how to really use it, end quote. One thing CDPR did flag is that their 60 FPS ambition doesn't really fly with the Xbox Series S console. Quote, this is something that's next on our radar. 60 FPS will be extremely challenging on the Series S. That is something we need to figure out, end quote. And yeah, look, I don't imagine anyone is expecting The Witcher 4 to run at 60 FPS on that little shoebox-sized console. Hell, if they can actually get this running at 60 FPS on a base PS5, I'm gonna be more than impressed. So yeah, CD Projekt Red, we will give you a pass on the Series S, so long as you promise that we are not in for a repeat of the sort of stuff we saw with Cyberpunk's PS4 and Xbox One ports. A quick lightning round to finish off. Nexus Mods has been sold. After 24 years at the helm, founder Robin Scott has sold the site to two individuals who may be venture capitalists with experience in taking over user-generated content platforms. Scott says the site was a, quote, regular source of anxiety and stress-related health issues, end quote, since he was basically on call every day for 2 decades, and yeah, that is a long time to be on call every day. He says he delayed the sale because he wanted to find a new owner who would be, quote, able to understand and respect the myriad intricacies of both Nexus Mods as a business and the wider modding community, end quote. Let's hope he's found the right buyers and that Nexus Mod doesn't become some casino site, I don't know. Warner Brothers has restructured its gaming business. It's now led by 3 people, one Yves Lachance, who will oversee Harry Potter and Game of Thrones games, Sean Himrick, who will oversee Mortal Kombat and DC games, and Steve Flannery, who will lead technology, central services, and publishing. Interestingly, there are rumors floating around that Sony are looking to acquire this game's business, scooping up some pretty massive and lucrative IP in the process. Imagine if both Spider-Man and Batman were PlayStation exclusives. It's easy if you try. Speaking of Sony, they have removed the ridiculous regional pricing restrictions on PlayStation PC ports related to PSN stuff. Remember that when Helldivers got a mandatory PSN sign-in and then Sony removed the ability to buy PlayStation games in over 120 countries and territories where the PSN was not supported? Well, it appears to be a complete about-face here, since those 120 locations can now purchase PlayStation games without needing to sign into the PSN. Once again, the internet has proven that bullying large corporations works. And finally, the Prince of Persia: Sands of Time remake still exists, or at least Ubisoft says it does. This one was rebooted a while ago and given back to Ubisoft Montreal. They have been totally silent about it for years now, but recently the game's official Twitter handle posted up a For Honor teaser, and everyone was like, what the hell, man? What is this? What's going on? People were really mad about it, so Ubisoft eventually had to put out a statement that says, quote, "Yep, we're still deep in the game, exploring, building, and ensuring the sands move with purpose. This game is being crafted by a team that truly cares, and they're pouring their hearts and a lot of coffee into every step," end quote. So yeah, it is coming, but it seems like a lot more sand is going to have to fall before we finally get a look at this one. So what got announced or delayed this week? Well, a bit of a quiet week this one, if I'm being honest. Part of that is because our show went out a day later than usual last week, but also since everyone else wanted to blast out their announcements during Summer Games Fest, we're left with this weird aftermath where it feels like it's a ghost town out there. Here's a free tip if you're wanting to announce a game next year. Do it the week after Summer Games Fest, and you might get a few more eyeballs on it. That's what the folks at Aggro Crab and Landfall figured out, because just this week they announced that they're working on a new game together. Just as a reminder, these are the indie developers who made Another Crab's Treasure and Content Warning, respectively. Both of them indie success stories in their own right. The new game is called Peak, which sounds a little presumptuous until you realize that it's a co-op game about climbing a mountain, which I say, fair play. It incorporates the collaborative nature of Content Warning along with the goofy challenges of Another Crab's Treasure, and interestingly, all of the game's maps rotate every 24 hours. If you're thinking, hey, this looks like something that me and my friends would get a kick out of, then I've got some good news for you. They actually shadow dropped this thing at the same time they announced it, and it's already got a pretty healthy player base and some good sentiment behind it on Steam. PC only for this one at the moment. Hey, remember Stray, that Annapurna game where you played as a cat in a post-apocalyptic world where humans don't exist? Well, it seems like the surge of love for cat-based media clearly had an impact on the entertainment industry writ large, because in what is the weirdest announcement of the week, maybe this whole month, the writer of Stray, a guy called Steve Lerner, announced a new media franchise called Cat Assassin. Very few details about this one, aside from the fact that a Canadian production house called Titan One Studios is handling it, and it's a neo-noir kind of thing that'll encompass film and TV, but it will lead with a stealth action video game, quote, "Inspired by the immersive gameplay of Assassin's Creed, the tactical espionage of Splinter Cell, the immersive feline agility of Stray, and the fluid combat of Sifu," end quote. Oh, and Dave Bautista is involved as a creative producer for some bizarre reason, maybe because the name of his company is called Dogbone Entertainment, and he thought it'd be funny. Totally bizarre. Anyway, let's see how this one goes. Another announcement that provided few details but generated far more excitement was the fact that Konami have tapped Bloober Team to do another Silent Hill remake, this time a remake of the first game. Fascinating to see how much the reaction to these two entities has changed since they came together to work on Silent Hill 2 Remake, but the truth is, Konami tapped the right team and they gave them the space to make something great, and Bloober Team did exactly that, so well done to them. The first Silent Hill has a very different vibe from the second. It's a lot more occult and Stephen King-esque. Here's hoping they reach the same high-quality bar they were able to with the Silent Hill 2 remake. And finally, that's not the only horror announcement from last week. Still Wakes the Deep, the BAFTA award-winning horror game from the Chinese Room, a game set on an oil rig off the coast of Scotland. Turns out it's getting a story expansion, which should be out by the time you watch this. It's called Sirens Rest, and it's set 10 years after the main game in the same location as the main game. Definitely worth visiting this one. If you missed it, this studio does make some cool shit. Alright, so what came out last week? Well, let's start off with Wizard of Legend 2, the sequel to the co-op spellcasting roguelike that came out back in 2018. This one released last Thursday into 1.0, but unfortunately, the mixed sentiment it experienced throughout its early access doesn't seem to have been fixed with its big launch update. Currently sitting at mixed Steam reviews with only 49% of them positive. Very disappointing given the original had some really passionate fans, Austin included. It seems like even the most dedicated of players are finding it hard to recommend. Here's Steam user Pizza Time, who has over 15 hours in the game, quote, "This game could have been great, I appreciate the hard work from the developers and the revival of my top 3 roguelikes of all time. However, this lacks the weighty combat in the previous title and variety in the runs. This game has potential to be great, but right now it's a mess. It's not worth the price nor the time to play it, especially until community feedback is received and implemented. I remain hopeful in the future of this game and the developer's ability to utilize constructive criticism from its community, end quote. Supporting that one is Steam user Mother, who has 18 hours in the game, saying, quote, even without comparing it to Wizard of Legend 1, this title feels extremely rushed and is not ready to be version 1.0. In every department, be it sound, design, etc., it's missing big pieces. It most definitely is fun, don't get me wrong, but it does need love and time, end quote. Moving on to a more positive story, The Alters was one of the big releases from last week. This is the new strategy management game from 11-bit studios, who made Frostpunk and This War of Mine, and love to inject a bit of pathos and moral dilemma into their titles. You play a sole survivor called Yarn, and the big thing here is the ability to clone Yarn to help him survive on this hostile planet, while dealing with all the shit that entails. It looks like that's been an effective conceit for lots of critics because it's sitting at a mighty 86 on OpenCritic, one of the strongest scores this week. Here's PC Gamer, who scored it a massive 90, quote, The Alters is tough, relentless, unforgettable, and highly replayable for a game with such a strong narrative. Every conversation choice I make inside the base matters, and every action I take outside of it has equal weight and meaning, with lots of possibilities for all the yarns and rarely any definitively correct choice of action. This anxiety-filled adventure is always one of my own making, end quote. By the way, we actually interviewed the game's leading man, Alex Jordan, as part of the Friends Per Second podcast last week. If you want to check out that interview, I will leave a link to it below the like button. Gex Trilogy also released last week. This is the remaster of the 3 early 3D platforming games by Crystal Dynamics. And if you have no idea who Gex is, then I think you might be okay leaving it that way. As you can imagine, a lot of the reviewers were very pleased to satisfy their weird nostalgia for this pop culture-laden series. But given the period it existed in, it's not exactly a great platformer to play in 2025. It's sitting at a fair 70 on OpenCritic, and here's Checkpoint Gaming, who landed on a 7 out of 10, saying, quote, There's no denying that the charm of the franchise still lies in its relentless pop culture references, thematic level design and offbeat tone, but like most platformers from the 90s, persistent control quirks, camera issues, and hit or miss humor mean these are nostalgic relics rather than forgotten masterpieces, end quote. If you remember the EA original game Lost in Random, you might be surprised to find out that they made a follow-up, and it's now a top-down action roguelike. Hades, you've done it again. This one's called The Eternal Die, and it's landed at a strong 82 on OpenCritic, with plenty of reviewers remarking its surprisingly strong combat, as well as the strong visual design that the original game was known for. But while it's definitely made a targeted effort to tap into a more popular genre, there are some folks who are a bit sad at the series leaving the action-adventure approach behind. Like Games Radar, for example. They scored this one 3.5 out of 5, with a really conflicted review that clicked with the new stuff, but were also disappointed with the de-emphasis on story in this world. Quote, Sprites and locations are beautifully drawn, the voice acting and sound design is exceptionally good quality, and stripped of any story-related expectation, the gameplay compels you to jump back in for another run. However much I may have been disappointed in the narrative, I can't deny I played until the early hours on multiple occasions just to beat that one boss or advance one more level, end quote. Date Everything is that game from a studio made up of voice actors where you could get into relationships with 100 different household objects in a sandbox visual novel dating sim, because why not? Some really passionate reviews for this one, which have landed at a strong 80 on OpenCritic, but there is quite a spread here, a mix of people who love the concept and characters, and hardcore visual novel people who wanted a bit more meat out of it. Here's Shaq News, who landed at a 7 out of 10, saying, quote, I wish the writing was a bit less shallow, which feels like a side effect of trying to cram so much into a small package, and doing so with a sandbox-style structure. Visual novels benefit from guardrails preventing them from catering too much to the player, and Date Everything abstains to its own detriment. But it's still cute and fun, and there's no denying the dopamine hits and humor from each new character reveal. Sassy Chap's debut game is a commendable effort, and more like this can only benefit visual novels as a whole, end quote. Moving on to Remedy's new game now, FPC Firebreak. This is a co-op shooter which represents a lot of relatively new ground for the studio. This is definitely not what you'd call their comfort zone. This one's landed at a fair 67 on OpenCritic with a modest spread of scores, some that are quite pleased by its setup and more casual approach to a repeatable shooter, while others were definitely itching for more. PC Gamer scored this one a fairly stiff 60 out of 100, taking issue with the short burst missions and some unbalanced difficulty ramping. Quote, Firebreak's jobs are small even compared to adjacent games like Left 4 Dead and Darktide. Played right through, they might take half an hour to see end to end, but by the time you reach the end of a Firebreak mission, you've already seen the bulk of it at least twice. So once I'd finished a job, I was kind of done with it, even though I'd spent less time in it than if it was a straight run to the finish line. The addition of new levels, which are coming later this year, will certainly help. In time, I see Firebreak becoming a perfectly decent cooperative shooter. For now though, it isn't quite a job well done, end quote. Faring about the same is Tron Catalyst, the top-down action game from Mike Bithell and team, taking on one of Disney's most underserved franchises. It's also landed at a fair 68 on OpenCritic, with the overall sentiment being that it's okay. One of the high reviews was it paced Catalyst magazine, they scored it 7.5 out of 10. Here's what they had to say, quote, "As beautiful and engaging as the world that Videogames has built for Catalyst is, and as pleasant as it is to move around in it, there's just a surprising lack of anything going on in it for EXO to do besides move and fight. There are no real mysteries on the grid, and allies are won over the drop of a hat. For all the incredibly talented work on display, Catalyst ends up a game that can't quite figure out how to fill its own space and still chafes against the lack of room to fully render. But goddamn, does racing a light cycle on the streets in defiance of core feel good," end quote. Well said. Alright, so what's coming out this week? Well, much like the announcements, it's a shockingly quiet week this week. If you were planning to release a game next year, you could do a lot worse than this particular week because, you know, there's not much. But there are a few notable releases. The biggest one is probably Rematch, which comes out on Thursday, June 19th, which poses the bold question, what if Rocket League, but people? Rematch is the next game from Slow Clap, the French studio who made the excellent kung fu game Sifu. And it's a multiplayer soccer game where you focus on a single player in a modified soccer match where there are no outs or fouls. You're part of a bigger team, but you have to worry about the micro-level decisions like how you handle the ball when you're dribbling down the field, how you get the ball past an opposing player or steal it from an incoming one, and of course, the pressure of aiming your passes and shots. Sounds like a simple concept on paper, but like Sifu and the real game of soccer, I guess, there's a lot of mind games and reading your opponent play here, on top of a lot of execution stuff to worry about too, but that clearly hasn't deterred many people because this game has been going absolutely gangbusters across its online network betas. It hit 160,000 concurrent players on Steam during the last one. There have been a few server issues during its paid deluxe edition early access launch, but hopefully those should die down before the punters arrive. This one's out on PC, PS5, and Xbox Series consoles. The other big one this week is Radar Remastered, The Mystery of the Soulless Army from Atlus and Sega, which also comes out on July 19th. This is a remaster of a Shin Megami Tensei spin-off that was originally released on PS2 back in 2006. And just in case you're not aware of the deep weeb lore, this is the RPG series that Persona is also a spin-off from. Ed tells me that this one is a bit of a cult favorite in the SMT fandom, and one of the big hooks here is that it's a bit of a dark detective story with a pretty unique setting in 1930s Japan. Definitely not a historically accurate story by any means, given all the demons and stuff. But the other big hook is that the battles in this one aren't turn-based. They're real-time action, very Devil May Cry inspired with swords and guns, but you still command your party of demons to cast spells, so there's a lot to manage. This one's coming to all platforms, including a Switch 2 version, actually. And finally, a small one to close things out this week. It's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Splintered Fate, which comes out on June 24th for PS5 and Xbox Series consoles. This is the co-op Hades-like take on the Turtles, which started off as an Apple Arcade exclusive, which was surprisingly good, and then eventually made its way to PC and Switch. Now, it's everywhere, which is just as well because it's supposed to have cross-platform multiplayer, which is nice. Okay, so we saw a lot of smaller games at Summer Games Fest this year, and honestly, a lot of them were fantastic. This is one that Stu checked out while he was over there, so put this on your radar.
Petal Runner is a mashup of Pokemon and WarioWare, which to me is a match made in heaven, and I can't believe it's never been done before. Instead of battling your creatures against each other, you're tasked with creating new pets for the townsfolk of Sapphire Valley using WarioWare-style microgames. The spirit of whimsy and exploration from the original Game Boy Pokemon titles is here in abundance, as you ride your motorcycle all over the valley to complete deliveries and side quests. The two-person team at Nano Park Studios has molded something truly special, and I was sad to have to put down the controller after my demo finished at Summer Game Fest. I can't wait to experience the full release when it launches in 2026, only on PC. If you want to put it on your wish list, we've left a link to our Steam Curator page where we profile all of our Put This On Your Radar picks. That link is in the description below.
Sort of free stuff time now, and over on the Epic Games Store, you've still got your chance to grab the excellent comedy management sim 2 Point Hospital until June 20th, but after that, well, I have no idea, because at the time of writing, Epic have not given any indication of what's next, not even a mystery present icon thing. Could this be the end of sort of free games from Epic? Definitely not. Like, this is the only reason that non-Fortnite players open the Epic Games Store, and Tim Sweeney knows it. Over on the Epic Mobile Store, they've got a couple of new ones, though, for those of you who can actually access this storefront, given that it's only available in select regions. One of them is Shapes, the excellent automation game that will absolutely destroy your life if you install it, and DC Heroes United is the second offering, which is part Vampire Survivors, but with DC comic characters, but also it's partly like a weekly streaming show. Super weird. It's a free-to-play game usually, but claiming it on Epic gets you a bunch of currency and an exclusive skin. Microsoft has announced its second wave of Game Pass games for June. There are some fantastic ones in the mix. Rematch is the big new game in this batch, which is great. Always got to go for the big player base with a multiplayer game like this. It's joined by an anime parenting simulator called Volcano Princess, which I'm sure is exactly what the kids want to be playing these days. On June 26th, we're getting a slew of strategy and RTS games, including Against the Storm, the remasters of Warcraft 1, 2, and 3. And finally, at the end of June, they're throwing out Call of Duty World War II, Little Nightmares 2, and Rise of the Tomb Raider. All of those are solid offerings, except for maybe Call of Duty, but hey, whatever, it's on Game Pass, go for it. Over in the world of Amazon, there's a very special day coming up in a month. That's right, it's Prime Day, aka Jeff Bezos' birthday, aka the day where every video game website becomes a complete mess with affiliate link articles with deals for gaming dehumidifiers or whatever, I don't know. The upside of that is that Amazon gives away even more free games than they usually do. In fact, they've started doing it right now. So if you're a Prime member, you can grab the likes of Saints Row 2, Saints Row 4, Star Wars Rebellion, Tomb Raider 1-3 Remastered, Dungeon of the Endless, and the excellent Toem on their free gaming page. Some really solid stuff in there, so thanks, Jeff. It's kind of like a Hobbit birthday party where he gives us presents. I'm not complaining. Our feel-good story is another one from the fighting game community files. Blind Warrior Sven is a competitive Street Fighter player who regularly competes and performs well in tournaments, despite the fact that he is blind. He uses Street Fighter's audio cues and accessibility settings to play the game, and while he's streaming, he does wear a blindfold, but it's purely cosmetic because he is blind. Still, someone came into his chat one day accusing him of cheating, saying that it was a see-through blindfold. Sven was more than happy to up the ante a little during an online match.
Round 2. Watching this lovely wall here, I mean, even if I cannot see it. Okay.
The true master of the fist.
Very nice work, Sven, and very nice work all of you for tuning in. Really do appreciate it. As I said, I do expect the Claire Obscure video to go up this weekend, and also a new episode of the Friends Per Second podcast. This week we're joined by Brandon Green, aka Player Unknown, and we chat about his PUBG days, the current state of the Battle Royale genre, and the next project he's working on right now. Really interesting chat, so don't miss it. And don't miss dropping this video a like, subscribing, dinging that notification bell, and maybe even following us over on Spotify if that is your poison. For now, thank you for watching, and a big thanks to this video's sponsor, Squarespace. It's never too late to make a switch. Look at me. A few years ago, I was chained to a desk doing corporate stuff. No disrespect to anyone who loves that, but it certainly wasn't making me happy. I've told this story before, but when I wanted to break into the games media business, no one would hire me, so I decided to make my own website that focused on game guides. The thing was, I had no idea how to build a website, so I had to spend a few $1,000s paying someone to build it for me, and the website was terrible, mind you. It wasn't the web designer's fault, it was entirely on me. My idea sucked. The point of my story is that back then you had to pay someone thousands of dollars to build a website for your business idea because that was pretty much the only way that a website could get made. Not so today, because thankfully we have Squarespace. Squarespace is the place to build almost any website you'll need. Want to sell handmade candles? You can build a website for that. Want to profile your art portfolio? You can build a website for that. Want to start writing gaming reviews and commentary to try to shoulder barge your way into the industry? You can build a website for that too. Squarespace's intuitive tools allow you to build professional looking websites in minutes, and their rich suite of e-commerce options allows you to promote and monetize your work so that you can begin making a living from it. In fact, Squarespace recently took things to a whole new level. Their all-new design intelligence framework leverages their 2 decades of experience in website creation to give you even more tools to shape the website of your dreams, helping you with things like copywriting, tone of voice, product descriptions, and even mailouts. So if you're looking for a sea change, then you're in luck, because not only is Squarespace free to get started with, but if you use offer code SKILLUP, you'll get 10% off your purchase of a domain name. Click the link below to get started. Thanks Squarespace for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.